Hello and welcome to the 16th Annual BTI Market Outlook and Client Service Review. I'm Michael Rynowecer, the President and Founder of the BTI Consulting Group. We have a great crowd today. We're going to break a record as soon as everybody is finished logging on, and we're pretty excited. We've got a lot of things to cover today. We have such a large crowd. Unfortunately, we cannot take questions live, but please send them to BTI webinars at bticonsulting.com, and we will respond after the session. There will be a recording of today's session available. We're hoping to get it out first thing tomorrow morning, so that'll be our afternoon priority. It is afternoon here just outside of Boston, where BTI is located. It is 42 degrees with a gorgeous blue sky. I mention that because it is much warmer than it has been for about the past 4 weeks, where we had some kind of polar event. Very, very cold. But we're delighted to the weather, and we're delighted to have you all with us today. Before we get started, I want to send out a special thank you to Jennifer Marcus, who is sitting quietly on the other side of this presentation, who is our Director of Operations effective January 1 of this year. And she is just instrumental in making all this happen. And Joyce Michelli, our lead interviewer, who makes sure that, especially as we get close to the webinar date, she is digging for all the new insight and all the new thinking that's kind of out there. So I appreciate their efforts, and we're going to really talk about a number of things today. But really how I'd like to get started today is by talking about physics. And when we talk about physics, I really would like to talk to you about very specifically fusion. Fusion is the idea and the concept that it consumes less energy than it produces. It takes atoms, it takes the energy source, and it can produce more energy than it consumes. This is a fundamental of why the theory of the sun being as bright as it is, the stars being as bright as they are, for as long as they are, it is the power behind all of that. And there's a couple of startups that have tried to develop fusion commercially. Google has actually entered into a purchase agreement to purchase this power source to help with their data centers. So it'll be interesting to watch on the one hand, but it's going to have a big impact on not just data centers and energy and the world, but on law firms. And you're probably asking yourself, well, how can fusion have such an impact on law firms? Well, in studying fusion, there's two things that really are important to understand. Fusion is the idea that you take two lighter atoms and you combine them to make a heavier atom, which is the energy. So if you take two lighter things, end up with something heavier, what you've got is you've produced more than you've consumed. Now, if we think of those two kind of lighter atoms, one being law, one being business that your clients are all in, when they combine, that is creating fusion. That is creating more of what is out there than was there before it. That means that the risks are getting higher. The kind of dynamics of the way clients are thinking about what they're doing is changing. And it's resulting, it's kind of interesting because when you think about this, for those of you that read the press, there's a growing trend to talk about nuclear verdicts. And they're so large and they're just so unexpected that, again, it's a fusion type event. So there's a lot of fusion going on. And if law firms can tap into that, there's going to be an extraordinary opportunity. And it also signifies how dramatic and how large kind of the dynamics are changing in the legal world, and what's making it so difficult for some and so amazingly lucrative for others. There's a couple of things that I think that underlie this. As I just mentioned, it's exploding value in risks and outcomes. So if you're a corporate counsel, if you're a general counsel, if you're a CEO, it's one thing to be worried about whether or not you're going to lose a claim for $5 million or $10 million. If you're a large company, maybe that's $500,000 if you're a small company. But now with the fusion of business and law, it's no longer about, am I going to get a fine? Am I going to lose a claim? It's about, how do I protect a revenue stream? How do I enter a new market? How do I get the technology that I need? How do I protect what seems to be unprotectable? These are changing what could be a measurable claim in litigation or an M&A transaction to revenue streams worth hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. If I'm selling something, I sure want to help with something that gets 100 millions in risk versus a million if I have the choice. This is what business and law fusion is doing, creating these immense opportunities for business if firms can figure it out. It's collapsing timeframes because when you're talking about business issues, there's no court dates. There's no looking out months or planning for a multi-year litigation. CEOs want answers. They want to get into the markets they want to be in. They want their competitive advantage. They're calling on their corporate legal officers much more frequently and expecting answers when they call, or at least certainly guidance. It's creating a whole litany of new matters and needs and clients, more big wins, which is the opposite of the value and risk, because if you can save a revenue stream, that is, enormously larger than anything else you might have saved the client. And as I mentioned, it's changing things faster than most law firms can see. And if you're missing this, you're going to watch a lot of high value, high rate work go by because things are moving just so quickly and it's dynamic. And on the one hand, it's exhilarating. On the other hand, it's a challenge to keep up with. So if you're not looking for it, and if you can't put your hands on it, then it's going to be a lot more difficult to get all the benefits that are going to come with this. So how do we tap into this? Well, there's a couple of things. We've been asking corporate counsel to describe their role for about, I'm going to say 10 to 12 years. And what's really interesting is between 2024 and 2025, what you had is a significant drop in those clients that would say, I'm no longer primarily the client defender, my company defender. I'm doing other things. That doesn't mean they're not defending the company. It means it's no longer the top priority. Now look at that. In the period of 1 year, we went from roughly 71% to 48%. That's about maybe a third drop. We expect that trend to continue. And you can kind of see that if you look out into the marketplace and look at what's happening with CLOs, chief legal officers. For those of you following the news, you already know that Apple hired the chief legal officer out of Meta about a month ago. Meta just announced that they hired the chief legal officer out of Microsoft. Microsoft promoted a new chief legal officer within the last month or so, who is pivotal in helping them make their business decisions about OpenAI and structuring that, as well as some other business type decisions which commingled and fused with legal. So if you want to see what's happening with the role of the CLO, I think that Apple, Meta, Google, Microsoft are going to be kind of like the bellwethers. They're going to be showing you the direction that all legal departments eventually will follow. Probably tech will lead the way. So watching the turnover, watching your clients hire, asking your clients if they're going to be bringing in new counsel, whether it be the CLO, the GC, or associate counsel, is going to be pivotal to positioning yourself to get some of this new and exciting and lucrative work. Now, the other side of the equation is if you ask clients if they were trusted advisors just a year ago in 2024, only about half said that they were really trusted advisors. Now, what's happened is corporate counsel are getting so many calls from their top executives, CEOs, board members. They're getting it from, EVPs, chief operating officers, because the linkage between the decisions on what they're going to be doing with their transformation digitally with AI and protecting their own development is intersecting with legal, as we just talked about. So if you're a CEO, where do you call? You call your CLO, you call your corporate counsel, and you start discussing with them. I can't tell you how many corporate counsel we have talked to that have said they have talked to their CEO, their COO, more times in the last 12 months than they have in sometimes their 10 or 15-year careers. Substantive conversations, that is. So what they're doing is, by providing this advice, they're certainly, embedding themselves in the business decisions, but it also places them where they need to have almost a real-time response to their management. You can't say to your CEO, I'll get back to you in a few weeks, I'll get back to you next week. They want an inkling, they want direction, because they need to make business decisions, and they just can't wait for the competition to sit back and say, oh, well, we'll figure this out too. Everyone is looking for that edge. So in order to kind of meet this need and help clients, they're turning to their outside counsel because they need to respond quickly. And they are looking for the counsel that give them answers. Doesn't have to be the final answer, doesn't have to be the thoughtfully detailed 42-page memo. They need what the author of The Tipping Point would tell you is a thin slice. A little bit of information, a little bit of direction, maybe big direction, depending on your experience, but they want to be able to hear from their outside counsel what makes sense in the facts that they have. And this is, notice that's almost, 90%, not quite doubling, but enough to certainly get our attention. And again, tapping into this and helping clients be the better trusted advisor is a key to getting new business and business development in this whole new world that we're operating in. And then finally, I also found it really interesting that in 2024, 14% of corporate counsel said they were growth enablers. That has more than doubled to, we'll call that 39%. So all of a sudden they go from being defenders to enablers, they're advisors, and they're really finding themselves in a position where they're doing things that they just simply have not done before, they've only heard about before, or maybe they've observed. So if you think about it, really what's happening is you have a lot of corporate counsel that were very much in their comfort zone. They are, they knew the regulations, they knew the strategies, they knew how to defend the company. Now they're being kind of brought into the growth zone. And for some corporate counsel, they couldn't wait for this day to happen. There's another group of corporate counsel that are saying, oh, wow, this is stressful. This is not what I thought it would be. This is asking me to step outside my knowledge base. And that's something where we really need to, you can only get to that by talking to your clients and listening to your clients. It's a very hard thing to pick up any other way. Now, the listening to the clients part isn't the real breakthrough. The breakthrough is the kind of stress points the clients are feeling about this. There's never been a higher stress point for corporate counsel before. So understanding that could lock you into a client wherever they may go, because we're expecting a lot of turnover based on the kind of Apple, Meta, Microsoft moves that I had mentioned. And being able to help them with their growth prospects and help their CEOs only helps you, your firm, and usually is going to lock in a long-term relationship. To get a better understanding of this, we asked over 350 corporate counsel to tell us the 3 words that kind of describe their daily role. Okay, what are they living? What are they feeling? What are they experiencing? This is a word cloud of the answers. The larger the word, the more we heard about it. The more towards the center, the more we heard about it. So you can kind of look from the center, look out. But there's a couple of anomalies. You can see what was interesting is, like looking right in the center here, you've got challenging, which is positive. You've got challenged, which, is a little bit more stressful, unpredictable, which can be both fast-paced, rewarding, frustrating, aggressive, fun. So you've got clients all over the map, and unappreciated. So you've got them all over the map. And if you really want to get the kind of the non-RFP, the really lucrative, juicy work, it's being able to tap into these kind of subtle thinking that clients have. They know most firms can do the work, but they don't believe many firms understand kind of where they're at and who really can help them, because this is underlying all their decisions. If you want to have a kind of a different look, we took the liberty of highlighting the positive words in green. So you can see challenging, interesting, dynamic, rewarding, innovative. You don't need me to read these to you, but they're what you would expect. But If you look at the red, which are kind of the challenging and more stressful sentiment, you've got, there's the word stressful right there that might say it all. We talked about being challenged as opposed to challenging, litigious, aggressive, overwhelming, frustrated, which words are all there. And when you put them in balance, you kind of get almost a 50-50 split. When we did the quantitative analysis, it's within 1 or 2% of each other. So your chances of getting this and understanding correctly and the way clients want you to understand it without kind of talking to clients in some way and having more than just a cursory dialogue, it's going to be a real challenge. You've got a kind of a 50-50 shot at getting it right. Given the rates that you can get, given the amount of business that is streaming into the law firm world, I would want to be kind of making sure that I'm developing questions and I'm developing ways to hear how clients are thinking. Client feedback certainly is one way, but there's other ways that you can be having these conversations with groups of clients, with individual clients, but somehow getting this on the agenda is going to be the difference between the super high growth that Amala loves to write about and the not so super high growth, which when it gets the publicity, it'll be popular, but doesn't get near the publicity that the growth firms do. So this is something to be thinking about. Now, what is the absolute key? What is the kind of one behavior that will get you into the middle of this? And for that, I would like to dedicate to the rest of this presentation to my friend the lizard here. Why would I be talking about lizards? Well, lizards are believed, and many have scientifically proven that lizards are absolutely one of the best listeners on the planet. They can hear amazing things, they can synthesize those things, and they can put it together to sense, how they kind of maneuver in their world. There's even some science to suggest that they go beyond listening and can integrate environmental factors, almost like a sixth sense. So the question is how do we become lizard-like and become what some people call the lizard is a super listener, not just a listener, but a super listener. And being the super listener is the difference, again, between getting that kind of inside track and being on the outside wondering what clients are thinking and doing. Couple of key things to understand about the super listener. A good listener will often listen to try to develop new business, where the super listener knows that if they listen and learn, they're going to get the new business. So they're going to focus on the learning. And that's one big difference right here. They kind of listen to understand, where most listeners, even in active listening, unfortunately, listening to respond versus listening to understand, because the super listeners know that they will learn, they will then understand. They hear not only what's said, but what is unsaid. What was silent, what wasn't brought up, what would you have expected to be brought up. This is like a second order analysis of what you've heard. And again, it adds context to everything you just learned and are trying to understand. What's other, the other big two are, you're connecting the dots between conversations, and most listeners, even good ones, will treat these as independent events. But to super listeners, these are patterns. These are what's happening. And sometimes they will connect what is said and unsaid in different conversations to be able to kind of triangulate what clients are thinking, how they're thinking, what the risks are, what they're concerned about. And if you want to kind of go through that, that's the process. Some will keep notes, some can do it mentally because they're very sharp, but the ability to kind of connect the conversations and keep the track going is the difference between that kind of deep super understanding and just an understanding. It's also important, there's something implied in here, is that this is plural. Multiple conversations. The conversations are ongoing. Interestingly, they're kind of short as opposed to long. There's a lot of exchanges of information. They tend to be highly, I call them high calorie conversations. They're short. There's a lot of meat in them. And if you can put those together over time, that puts you in the super listener category. And then finally, this is something that I've seen, I've heard about, I hear about in our interviews, is that many times in a conversation, we've all talked about the awkward silence. And what super listeners have learned is that that silence, that awkwardness is often the time clients need to process their thinking. So they have learned to use that to give the client that space. A good listener will often try to fill that space because they don't like the awkward silence. They're concerned that their client, whoever it is they're talking to, prospect, whoever it might be, is uncomfortable because of this. So they will allow the client to process the thinking. If it goes too long or what they think is too long, they may say something like, let's share our thinking. What are you thinking? Let's think out loud, to kind of create a safe zone to go into that kind of listening zone, that super listening zone, away from breaking up that process. This is often pivotal in business development, as you can develop new services, you can develop kind of new risks, new needs that the client may not see. And this is extra helpful because if you can get into a mode where you're kind of co-solutioning with them, you're working with them, that's going to put you in a category that very few firms are in. And again, drives you to the place where that high business is, the high rate business on the inside track, being able to get to that before any other firm even thinks about it. Now, based on that, what we've been doing over the past couple of years, actually we've been doing it for more than 20, but it coalesced over the past 5 or 6 years, is what are the different things that really are driving the business development right now? What is, the things that make client go to one firm or the other? So we went out, based on thousands of interviews, we were gauging the importance and influence of the core kind of BD activities that are often living in the marketing and business development department, their behaviors that the attorneys, the partners engage in, and their, in some ways, their behaviors that clients kind of observe or more importantly, engage in. So, for example, they'll observe as opposing counsel is a big source of who I might think about wanting to throw my business to. On the other hand, if you're actively networking online, clients online together, that is networking different clients to each other, you can see you've got content sharing. This is the trust factor along here. This is the value factor. Now, in order to get hired, we got to find a way to deliver both, which is kind of where this matrix comes in. This area up here is where you've got high trust or higher trust and higher value. If you can start delivering on those, that's going to be the place where business gets awarded along the inside track. That doesn't mean that these things out here aren't important, because they are, because this is what's going to get you to a point where you can start establishing all the things that are with the purple dots that are the highly influential. They're the things that will get you hired. They're the things that make clients forget about all the other things, all the other firms that they hear. It's a matter of, the relevance factor is high in here, the value factor is high, and the trust. So this is something that's earned. These are both earned as well. And this is how clients are kind of thinking about things. So when we look at this, what we see is the kind of 6 factors that are up here are, you can see the top of the list, the most important thing in any business development situation is super listening. The ability to get the business without super listening is exceptionally difficult. That's why you've got things like RFPs are only down here, because that's just the beginning of the process. They don't know if you're a super listener, and most RFPs are not. You don't see super listeners. You see a lot of talking of clients, as many of the people on this presentation today already know. I mentioned the value in co-solutioning. So if you're sitting there in that awkward silence, what that may actually be is kind of an unrecognized opportunity to develop something with a client. You can see that that brings in value because you're getting to a solution, and it brings in trust because your client is providing you with what you need at the time you need it. They're being authoritative, they're being informative, they're providing new information. It's a really good setup for kind of the super listener approach to getting business, but you can't get there unless you've got the super listening. You've got anticipating needs. Now, what's great about this is this easily links to co-solutioning because you can help clients anticipate through your questions and through your listening. So these will often work together. And what's happening in today's day and age is innovative solutions are now becoming, super important because there's so many new and novel cases. There's so many new and novel claims. Clients want the new and innovative solutions they haven't seen before. In addition, as we talked about, the fusion of business issues and legal issues require different thinking, different matters, different approaches. There may not even be precedents for this, or we have to apply old precedents to completely new fact patterns. And these are the things that show that you're invested, that you're willing to kind of put in more work than most, because only 21% of law firms show up as delivering these kinds of innovative solutions. And then finally, you've got, creativity, which means that you've got something new, you've got something they haven't seen before, and maybe, it's going to be linked to something innovative if that works. And then finally, educating. There's very few things that will create a bond as strong as educating. And what's, as you think about, educating clients, it's one of the few things in the world that will deliver that kind of dopamine high to both the educator and the educatee. That is, dopamine rises. You get a dopamine hit when you teach somebody. You get a dopamine hit when you learn something. That's why people love their schools. That's why people so much like to learn and take online courses and self-development. So if you can find a way to educate your clients, you're now doing that kind of dual dopamine. Now, just before we leave this, I have to tell you that there's another dual dopamine phenomena, which is actually, it's a dopamine phenomena, which is talking about yourself induces a dopamine hit. So think about that. Why do people talk about themselves when they're pitching? Because you're getting that dopamine hit. It takes some discipline. It takes some understanding to realize you can get the same, if not better discipline, your dopamine hit by educating clients, and they're going to get it the same way. So the dopamine can be a double-edged sword. As you look outside of what we call the super listener matrix up here, you've got your strong BD kinds of activities. You've got your thought leadership. You've got an active LinkedIn bios, content sharing, RFPs, networking your way in. We could go through these. Everybody's famous, favorite ranking and directories, which, are kind of outside of that box. But the point being is, think of this in two phases. Here's how we can, remain relevant, if you will. And here's how we can improve our relevance. We can improve our kind of lock into clients. And, the more we do of this, it tends to drive this, but nothing will drive what's up here more than super listening. So why is all this important? Well, there's a lot of reasons: long-term success, strategic positioning, market positioning. But in the near term, 61% of corporate counsel are planning to increase their legal spending by a pretty reasonable amount in 2026. So if you want to get to that work, and you want to get to that work faster, better, with higher rates than everybody else, that's going to take the super listening. Only 23% are going to hold steady, and that takes care of roughly 84% of the market. There's always going to be a portion of the market that's cutting, and that means that your chances that your clients are at least increasing or holding steady are pretty good. So how are you going to be able to tap that business without issuing thousands of RFPs and without kind of doing mass emails? Well, it comes back to picking your clients, picking the best clients, picking the strategic clients, and then finding ways to have conversations with them. That is going to have less effort than an RFP, be highly effective, and at the end of the day, more attorneys will like it than not like it, because they do like to engage with clients once they may get over any reticence to want to talk to their clients about things like this. Now, what's interesting is if you think about the 61%, what you've got is also, we ask corporate counsel, who wants their law firms to use AI to get better outcomes? And coincidentally, that's also this almost the same exact 61%. Now, I know there's a lot of polarization about use of AI, and one of the things I'm personally finding interesting is every blog post that I do about AI, I get equal numbers of emails saying AI is nothing but the wizard behind the curtain, and I get an equal amount saying it's going to change the world. So it'll be interesting to see what happens today. But the point is that most of the clients that are increasing their spending, what I want to do is really cross out AI and really emphasize this. What they're really saying is they want better outcomes. And if AI can get you a better outcome, you ought to use it. It isn't really a mandate that says, show us how you're using AI to get us better outcomes. They're just saying it's a new world. Go back to the slide we talked about where they're between the growth zone and the comfort zone. Go back to the fusion that's taking place, the overlap between business and law. Go back to they're all advisors now. There are so many of them advisors. They want a better outcome, period. If AI gets you there, that's great. If AI is not the vehicle to get there, they don't really care. They want the better outcome. Co-solutioning, which is one of the 6 activities, is an immensely effective way to get a better outcome. Creativity, all the things that are in that upper right quadrant of the super listener BD approach is what's going to get you to the place where you get better outcomes. And this speaks to the fact that clients are not really necessarily feeling like they're getting what they want from about 71% of their law firms. So if you're in the 29%, good for you, you're in the green, but you can never give a client too good an outcome. So working at this and working with your clients and having this lead you, because it's so important to those that are increasing their spending, it will define a path right to where the increased spending is. So think of this more as a BD roadmap than a litmus test on using AI. How do you get better outcomes? I wouldn't take on the argument whether you should or shouldn't use AI, but I will tell you anything you can do to get a better outcome is going to only get you in a place where clients stop thinking about other law firms as essential. You will become the essential law firm. So where will this business be? What does it look like? I want to go through a few of the individual practices. These are the practices we cover in the BTI Practice Outlook Report, which we released at the end of November for the 15 or 16 different practices that we are interviewing about and getting the details. For roughly the 3rd year in a row, everything is growing. And everything is, there's not a lot over here in the rate pressure zone. You can see everything to the right is getting better rates. Everything moving up above this horizontal line is growing. So it's only a question of how quickly we're growing. There's kind of 3 different segments. You've got kind of litigation employment, then you've got this grouping, and then you've got some others. So the opportunities are certainly there. Depending on your individual firm, you're going to want to emphasize some of these over others. And this is going to be, the roadmap overlaid with your kind of co-solutioning and super listening to be able to roll this out practice by practice. Starting with employment, the fastest growing practice. I can tell you that out of more than 350 interviews, I don't think there was one corporate counsel that didn't think any decision they made about doing something with DEI or affirmative action was not going to bring a lawsuit. They just saw it as a class action or some kind of action waiting to happen, and they're still trying to figure out exactly what they should be doing. They're talking about new mental health claims, AI bias in hiring. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and for 20 years, I've heard that wage and hour is finally worn out its welcome, but clients don't think so. It's alive and well and growing. If you're looking to develop business here, up until probably last year, you had two major approaches. The labor-only firms were coming at it from a regulatory perspective, being able to help clients anticipate regulations and changes. The general practice firms were equally as strong and coming in by industry. What you've got now is some of the labor-only firms are introducing more industry kind of perspectives. The general practice firms are getting more specific about tactics and strategies by industries. We're seeing industry play a larger role, industry practice, industry risk, industry preference, industry strategies that is winning more work at this juncture. Not that clients aren't worried about all the regulatory changes and all the regulatory conflicts, but they see the competitive aspect coming in. And this is, again, where you see the fusion of business and law. It's where the industry knowledge is going to be what they need to tell the CEO. CEO doesn't want to know about the regulations. They want to know what they need to do. And that's where the industry knowledge comes in. And it's understanding the impact on operations. So understanding that, these corporate counsel are now talking to their CEOs regularly. What they're doing is they're saying, I need to understand the impact of whatever problem I'm taking to you as my outside law firm on operations. Is it going to, raise red flags? Is it likely to hinder operations? Is it likely to somehow, make operations smoother? You see this a lot in tech. You see a lot in financial services, and you're seeing a lot in manufacturing where they're adopting digital or AI kinds of transformational change. Litigation, commercial litigation is, I'm going to say roughly 1/3 of it is price sensitive, 2/3 of it is, strong to robust. There are so many new and novel claims that are out there. And more importantly, or equally importantly, is that clients will tell you, nobody really wants to settle anymore. The plaintiffs don't want to settle. They're not excited about settling. So they see themselves digging in. They're going further in litigation matters than they thought they might. It requires kind of new strategy and new thinking on the part of outside counsel to go that much deeper. Some of the new issues that you're hearing about that there's serious litigation over is AI content that is either governed or not governed by contract with third parties, access and use of data for training models, tech implementation failures, which are growing fairly dramatically, the joint ventures and partnerships that were created 3 years ago are now unraveling, some of them anyway, and there could be some very big money. I mean, just look at the poster child for restructuring joint ventures, partnerships, and investors would be OpenAI, which seems to every week raise an enormous amount of money, have new partners who are competitors conflicting each other. It's just, imagine that on every scale with so many different JVs, but or the investors, and that's the kind of thing that's going on right down the line to some of the small investments that companies have made. Their resupply chains are, for many of them, trying to undo contracts, and supply contracts are really challenging. And again, the way to get this business is twofold. One is knowing the impact on the business. Is it affecting revenue? Is it affecting cost? Is it affecting our supply chain? Is it affecting tariffs? Is it affecting regulatory issues in Europe where they seem to be pretty anti-US? Knowing that, walking in the door, being fluent when you walk in the door about where this may go, what it could be, understanding that it's no longer litigation, it's a business issue, and the risk of a business issue is just so quantifiably higher that anybody who doesn't talk, and you don't necessarily have to know the business issue as you walk in the door, but in order to make an impact, ask. Asking is just as good as knowing because they'll tell you, but they want to deal with law firms who know that it has a business impact. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about IP litigation. This, I have to tell you, has become one of the most aggressive parts of litigation. Almost every single corporate counsel that we interviewed want to just obliterate and crush the other side. They don't want to settle. They don't want an amicable agreement. They want the other side so they don't exist anymore. Some of the big issues, very few interested in settlement anymore. It's all about winning and crushing the other side. IP leakage through AI is a big issue right now. AI-assisted patent trolls are something that are emerging as a problem. Brand knockoffs are an issue moving out of kind of like the patent range. And what really clients want is, one, the impact in knowing that certain intellectual property has a huge impact on the product roadmap, product planning, revenue, market rollouts, market positioning, and they also want unfailing confidence that whoever they hire is going to have a winner-take-all attitude. They want a creative strategy that can deal with the litigation, the idea that we don't want to settle, and they kind of want to know that you're in the foxhole with them. You're sitting there beside them, and you've got the same level of investment. That's what's getting the kind of business, especially in tech and pharma. And now you're starting to see it in some of the big global manufacturing companies where there's large-scale adoption of technology and AI. Class actions are growing. Again, one of the top growers. Claims are getting bigger, which are creating bigger cases, bigger fees. It's interesting because plaintiffs are finding more ways to make claims from the same situation. I think 4 years ago, a cyber breach would generate one class action. Now they're generating between 2 and 6. So the plaintiffs are getting very creative. You've got issues around biological data privacy, which are now coming up as some pretty large class actions. What clients want in a law firm is they want quick assessment. That word fluent comes up again. Can you walk in the door and know kind of what's going on or assess it? They want aggressive stands, and they want strategies to deal what they will call pile-on litigation, because the minute you get class action, it raises awareness of perhaps other issues, of regulatory issues, and this will really kind of be the trifecta in the way to get the class action work that's out there now, and understanding how big that it's gotten and the impact, in some cases, of the company's size on the balance sheet itself. So, the opportunity is there, but clients, really want to see that fluency, that firms are not intimidated by the size of it, that they can see all the different things that are can roll out of the class action, and being able to stand up in front of a client on day one and be able to talk about those things. And then finally, it just wouldn't be fun if we didn't talk about M&A. There's super pent up demand. Tech and pharma, especially manufacturing, they see their M&A activities as more strategic than they have ever been. It's enabling them to leapfrog competition. It's enabling them to be able to be in a place where they can change their product line to take advantage of all the technologies that might be out there, whether it be AI or not, although so many are. They're kind of looking for creative structures. Right now, kind of Microsoft led the way they invested in OpenAI. NVIDIA is doing a lot of things to make sure they can acquire the assets they need, the people they need. Meta's doing the same thing. So they're looking for structures. The regulators are starting to catch up with these structures, so it's incumbent on the law firms to be able to come up with even newer structures to kind of stay one step ahead, and being able to deal with what could be hostile regulatory agencies. Clients are just they're just not sure what kind of reaction they're going to get in so many different arenas. So having that flexibility, and then there's a high education quotient. Clients want to be educated by their M&A firms so they're up to speed, and they want to see supreme confidence. The firms walking in the door with that are the ones getting those big M&A assignments that are only going to get larger, and probably if interest rates get cut or the economy gets picks up a little bit more, you're going to see more and more activity. And then finally, bet the company. It's actually become a growth industry. When we first started doing this, there were 4 reasons why something would become bet the company. Now there's 15. Some of them include things like, decimating the balance sheet, stopping operations, halting a revenue stream, something that could become criminal. What clients want is the law firm that walks in with a real-time assessment, knows the client culture, knows their risk sensitivities, their risk adverse, where their kind of risk soft spots are, and focus on either settling and defending at the same time. The firms that can walk in and talk about what it means for the stock price, the balance sheet, and defending them are much more likely to win the work than those that talk about how many bet the company matters they have won and lost. For those of you that have joined us in one of the last 16 webinars or the 6 meetings that we had in New York before we went to the webinar format, this is what we affectionately within BTI call the BTI hotspots. The blue is where the need is the most acute. It's growing and it is getting high rates. The gray is where there's moderate growth, and the dark gray is where there's low growth. You'll see there's only one place for that. If you want to kind of understand this, the way most of our clients use this is they will take it by industry and see where the hotspots are. If you're looking at this, tech has 13, pharma has 12, healthcare has 10, manufacturing 10, consumer goods 9, transportation has 9. That's a lot of hotspots. That's a lot of acute needs in some very high spending industries. If you look at it by practice, M&A, you'll find 11 industries. Regulatory, you'll find 11. Litigation, you'll find 11. Labor and employment, 10. Class action, 10. There's a lot of hotspots on here. Again, what most of our clients will do is they will lay it out by practice and or industry, work with their practice group heads, and try to map out which clients fit into kind of which need and how to go and engage in the super listening and the co-solutioning and all those things that will get you the kind of business that you want to get. You would get more work from 2 clients than you would get from probably most of the RFPs that you would send out in a single year. But the point of this is there's a lot of opportunity by industry, a lot of opportunity by practice. And this will kind of, since industry knowledge is so important right now because of the fusing of business and law, this is kind of your roadmap on how to do that. So how do you win in a law fusion world? First, we highly recommend asking what we call catalyst questions. So what's keeping this from moving faster? What can we do? Whatever the issue is, how do we move faster? Because that's what CEOs want. What's the most important impacts on the business? Even if you think you know, ask. You will learn something from your client. What are we underestimating? What are we missing? Clients will tell you. They will stop. They will think. And can we reframe this? How do we think about this differently? How do we start from the left instead of the right, or the front instead of the back? Clients, these are all steps to start your co-solutioning. Clients, I've had attorneys say to me, won't clients think I'm not very smart if I ask these questions? But it's interesting because clients think you're very smart if you ask these questions. They know that you can't get them a better outcome until you answer these questions, especially in today's world. So we would highly recommend not just using them, training your partners to the extent you can, even if it's just a half hour. How do you ask these questions? What kind of answers to expect? How do you engage to create that super listener profile? Second, Create an anticipation of needs review. Every 90 days, take one top client, two top clients, put some smart partners in a room and say, what can we anticipate for this client? What's likely to happen? Now, your 90-day isn't your anticipation period. You may look out 90 days, 100 days, a year, but the purpose is by having it at least once a quarter, you institutionalize this idea of we're always going to be looking forward to what's going on in our client, focusing on the top clients of the firm. That will change the culture and how the attorneys think about business development. Following client job boards and postings. You know, it's great to track them in the news and Google Alerts, but if you really want to know what clients are up to, see what jobs they are posting. Apple, when they were trying to develop a fully autonomous car, they put all the ads on LinkedIn, the most secretive company in the world, except for defense contractors, openly put the jobs right up on the postings, LinkedIn, and then the Wall Street Journal grabbed that and wrote a whole story on it. Now Apple doesn't do that so much anymore. But the point is that you will learn where they're headed, what to anticipate. You can use that as a kind of a conversation starter for your co-solutioning, for your learning, for your super listening, but it'll give you a perspective on how clients view themselves moving forward in a way that almost no other document or no other piece of intelligence can. Provide small format value every week. Now, this can be 2 sentences. Recruit an associate to help. Do one-on-one with one associate to a partner, one associate to 2 partners, whatever your ratio is. Get an associate in, have them come up with 2 high-value sentences per week, maybe every 2 weeks, about a client. That's it, maybe 2 clients. But clients love small snippets of high-value information. 2 sentences, high value, do that 3 weeks in a row, do that 3 months in a row, you will be remembered. They will look for those emails, and it'll be way more effective than any client alert that you could possibly come up with. And it'll be teaching your associates how important it is to understand clients, and it'll be making the partners look better. Finally, I would recommend you adopt one of my favorite exercises, which is the 15-minute why, win, and lose exercise. I like to take no more than 10 or 12 attorneys, put them in a Zoom call or put them around a table, and you say, I'd like each one in the room to tell me about their best win. At least 8 of the 10 partners in the room will say something to the effect of, oh, I could see this coming. I had it wired. I know this client like the back of my hand. I knew exactly what was happening. I could see this from a mile away. Then you go, you ask the same attorneys, tell me about your biggest loss. And inevitably you will hear about how some other, not so bright firm bought it, how, the other firm didn't know what they were getting into. Oh, the corporate counsel, didn't have authority to hire us. Our price was too high, which was the famous one. And, my other favorite is, the other firm was just a bunch of assholes. Well, it was always interesting because if you point out at the end of that exercise that we always win because we had it wired and we understood it better than everybody else. And when we lose, it was because the other firms were largely idiots. So think about the power of that and how to get them to focus on the super listening. And that's kind of where we are today. This, we think, and we're seeing our clients are using this approach and getting assignments that are much, much bigger than they might have anticipated when they started this, and are kind of all in on how this goes. So with all that, we think there's a lot of material here that can help you develop business. We certainly hope that you find it the same way. We appreciate you taking the time early in the year, and we invite any comments, questions, thoughts, please. That's my direct dial. You can email me, and we will be responding to emails starting as soon as we shut down the webinar today. So I would like to thank each one of you for joining us, wishing you the best of luck in your super listening, and look forward to hearing how successful everybody has been. Thank you.